In today's episode, we have Aurora Winter, who is going to walk us through how she launched a free plus shipping model for a book and brought in over $250,000 in revenue in just 90 days. So stick around. If you want to build a legitimate, profitable online business without shiny objects, without the hypey gimmicks, and without the stress and overwhelm, if you want to make more money without having to be present online all day, every day, pumping out content that nobody sees and hustling DMs to generate leads and sales, then this is the place for you. Welcome to the Digital Trailblazer podcast, your online business university, where you'll learn how ordinary people start from ground zero with no influence, no email list or audience to sell to, and no business or marketing experience, and go from working 9-to-5 jobs to building successful 6- and 7-figure online businesses and all the steps in between. Learn the strategies that worked and what didn't. Learn the mistakes that they made and how to avoid them, and then learn their plans for scaling their businesses and taking things to the next level. All so that you can build your business faster and easier and make more money without sacrificing the things that are important to you in your life. I'm your host, Leah Ray Getz, and with me is my husband, Todd. Now, let's get to it with today's guest. Welcome, Aurora. We're excited to have you with us today. Why don't you go ahead and give a little background for the audience before we get into all the nuts and bolts of the funnel and the kind of the really cool stuff that you're doing.
Hi, Leah and Todd. It's great to be on the show with you. Well, my intention is to help everybody turn their words into wealth. My background is as a successful serial entrepreneur. I launched my first business in my 20s, which was in the yacht sales and yacht charter industry, sold that business in my 20s and moved on to film and television, made 8 films, raised $5 million, and gone on to multiple other businesses. And now I'm in the business of helping people write, publish, and promote books and get to the next level as thought leaders. But I think we can find that the marketing principles work over multiple different businesses.
Absolutely. And I think I love the fact that you're a marketer helping people with books and messaging and everything else, because I see the problem way too frequently that people want to be thought leaders. They want to create a book to help their business. And I think the book is like this magic bullet, but they don't learn anything about marketing or how to connect it to the other things that they're doing or how to even sell the book in the first place.
Exactly, Leah. That's why I wrote this book, Turn Words into Wealth, Blueprint for Your Business, Brand, and Book. It's got 7 different recipes for making 7 figures with your book. And I wrote it because I was really heartbroken. The average person takes 3.5 years to write their first book. And time again, I would see that they'd put so much love and energy and effort into the book, but they would drop the ball at the 95%. They wouldn't test the title. They wouldn't test the subtitle. They wouldn't test the image. There was no call to action. There was no, if you want more than this book, then go to my website and here's why you should go to the website and here's the value add. So you can spend 3.5 years writing a book and then launch it to crickets. The other thing, like I am focused at Same Page Publishing on helping people launch best-selling, award-winning books. So a common mistake that people make is they launch the book and then they start the marketing. Whereas we have a 6-month book launch process preceding the date of publication. We apply for awards, we get reviews, we send out advanced reader copies, we send it out to beta readers to bulletproof it, that nothing is confusing or nothing is missing, and that it hits the target audience. Because you don't want your book to try to just be all things to all people. You want to solve a specific problem for a specific kind of business or person. And if you do that, the book can really be a great lead magnet for your business. But to be really clear, why are you writing this book? Who is it for? What problems does it solve? And then don't drop the ball right at the finish line after you put all that love into it by forgetting that it's just, I think a book is an appetizer. It's just the beginning of a relationship. It's the beginning of something. But if you don't offer people the next step, it'll be also the beginning and the end.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm quite curious because now, what kind of books have you published yourself? Because it's kind of, you've got that book, which is obviously marketing and business, but you're more than that. You've got like story, like fiction as well, correct?
Exactly. Well, my background is I'm an award-winning screenwriter. I'm a film and television producer. So I've actually written about 30 screenplays. A couple of them were made into movies. I've written self-help books. I've published a memoir. Most recently, I've published a fantasy series for young adults, Magic, Mystery, and the Multiverse. which won the Reader's Choice Award Best Book for Teens. It's available today for free on Amazon if you want to grab the ebook, or people can go to Magic Mystery and the multiverse.com and get all the links and see about the Kickstarter and stuff. So I have a very broad and deep interest in writing and communication, but basically I'm a creative entrepreneur. I'm always solving problems, and sometimes the best way to solve that problem has an element of a book in it. So for example, with Magic Mystery and the Multiverse, I was solving two problems. One, little 9-year-old me had wanted to write a book like C.S. Lewis's The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, but I had gone into business, done things practical, got my MBA. And when COVID hit and we were all reminded that life is fleeting, I was like, you know what? I'm going to honor that 9-year-old's dream to write a book like that. And so this trilogy was born. But as I was writing the book, I'm like, who is this for? I wanted a clean, fun, fast-paced fantasy that, an 11-year-old or a 91-year-old would enjoy without cringing with any spicy kind of thing, like The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, or like Doctor Who, or Harry Potter, or Percy Jackson, or Howl's Moving Castle. So I wrote it for that kind of person, and BBC is interested in turning it into a series. So that's pretty cool. And that's one of the 7 ways I've written about in Turn Words into Wealth. Your book is intellectual property. One of the ways to make 7 figures with it is consider movies, television, merchandising.
That's smart and wonderful. And I'm a major fantasy reader, so I will definitely be checking that out and probably reading it to my kiddo.
Oh, awesome, Leah.
So that's awesome. So let's kind of get into this funnel and what you created and how were you able to use, tell us the story first, and then we'll kind of get into the nuts and bolts of it.
Okay, so I'll give you the broad strokes. I've always wanted to be a writer since I was 9. I've published 10 books. I'm also a ghostwriter or help people with books. So I have a lot of wordsmithing in my background and a lot of different kinds of businesses in my background. My husband died suddenly when he was 33 and our son was 4. So what launched out of that was a real passion and desire to help people go from heartbreak to happiness. So I wrote several books about how to go from heartbreak to happiness, launched the Grief Coach Academy, and for many years devoted my life to helping people get through grief much more quickly. On average, it takes people 7 years to get through a devastating loss, like the loss of a spouse, the loss of a child, or even the loss of a career that was part of their identity. And I'm like, that's too long. So I created a process to accelerate that. But I'm a creative entrepreneur, which means I'm restless. And at a certain point, I'm like, I don't want the rest of my life to be about talking about grief. But I built a nice business. Somebody else is running it now, a wonderful woman, Audrey White. And I wanted to see, people kept asking me, how did I get on TV? How did I get on radio? How did I write so many books? Tell them. So I thought, well, maybe people would be interested in me helping them with their marketing, messaging, and book publishing. But I wanted to test to make sure before completely pivoting my business. So I love to recommend a 90-day test. So I did my own recommendation. So whatever, if you're thinking of pivoting, can you come up with a cheap and expensive 90-day test to see if there's demand? So many people spend so much money launching businesses that there's no demand for. Yes, check demand first. In fact, some of the businesses that have raised, 8 figures through venture capital, and then they blow it all on really fancy office space and hundreds of people on their team, but there's no demand for their product. Anyway, I digress. So I thought one of my friends was the director of coaching for Tony Robbins at the time, Mark von Musser. He had previously interviewed me about how to help people through stress and grief and setbacks and mindset. So I'd already spoken once to about 100 coaches at Tony Robbins. I called him and said, hey, I'd love to see if you would be interested in me contributing on the areas of messaging, marketing, and starting new businesses. He said, sure, because he knew me. He knew that I'd launched multiple 7-figure businesses. So we did about a 1-hour call with the coaches listening from Tony Robbins' coaching team. And I talked about how to fast track your marketing. Things that I'd done that didn't work, things that did work, things that 10x'd it, and some general principles of communication. I really liked that interview. So I transcribed that 1-hour interview and turned it into the little book that could. And that little book was called Marketing Fastrack. I offered it to my list of 12,000 people, small email list, of people who knew me as the founder of the Grief Coach Academy, a completely different kind of business. They paid $4.77 for shipping, which actually was important because then people actually were interested. It wasn't like the free ebook download that nobody reads. And then the book is a physical, like silent salesperson on their bookshelf. And then I provided 5 videos adding more value, giving them some actionable, useful advice about how to create their $1 million message. And at the end of that time of building know, like, and trust, I said, hey, if you'd like more help with your book or your messaging or your marketing, sign up for a business breakthrough call. And the result of that was $250,000 of new business in 90 days. Now, to be fair, I want to be clear, it wasn't selling the book for $250,000. I lost about $1 a book because the cost of printing and shipping was a little bit more than $4.77, but I'll pay $1 all day long for a lead. So that was very, very good. And then, so basically that was a 7-figure business, but I had so much business so fast. I'm like, whoa, time out. I need to, pivot and get more team to help me with that. But it was a very good test. And that way, with confidence, I started Same Page Publishing and knew that I was offering something useful in the marketplace that people really wanted. The other element I do want to be clear about is I had an irresistible offer with a high price point. I wasn't selling something for $5,000, right? You can't really afford to do all of that if you're selling another $20 book, right? You need to have a lifetime value of a customer that is probably at least $10,000 or more. But my customers don't leave. So they've been with me for years. So actually that funnel made even more than that if you count forward. And this is something people can do.
Yeah. And I think that if you're getting a lead up front that is willing to pay money to become a lead for smaller resource like a book or something else, those are typically the type of people who are willing to pay more to get more as well. So it's something that would allow you to raise your prices on whatever program you've got on the back end anyways.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And the other things that I emphasize in my book, Turn Words into Wealth, is that the whole conversation changes when you are the author. The root word of the word authority is author. So instead of being perceived as a salesperson, and we all have horror stories from used car salespeople, that's not the dynamic. It shifts the dynamic. You're the expert. You're like more perceived like a doctor. And your time is like, oh my gosh, the author is going to talk to me. It's like completely shifts the dynamic when we're an author, even of a little book. And then because that book was popular, then I wrote the much longer, fully explained book, Turn Words into Wealth. And I almost took Marketing Fastrack off the market, but it's not in alignment with who I am. I thought, you know what? We all see, for example, the final product of Taylor Swift, or we see the final product of Gmail with all its bells and whistles. But Gmail was launched with 3 features, and then they added according to demand. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to leave Marketing Fastrack available so people can get it and they can see an example of what does a little book look like. You can record yourself. You can answer the frequently asked questions. You can have your spouse or friend interview you, or if you want to do it the fast and easy way, you can come to me at Same Page Publishing and we'll help you do that, and much, much more. But you can get Marketing Fastrack by going to turnwordsintowealth.com, or it's also available wherever books are sold for free. My gift to you.
That's awesome. I love all of this. So one thing that popped into my mind as you're telling the story is, yes, you had a small, some people might think it was big if they're just getting started building their email list. But generally, in the grand scope of things, a smaller email list that you were able to do this test with. How do you suggest someone test who's kind of starting from scratch and doesn't have an audience that they can tap into to test a new offer if they're looking to make some kind of pivot like that?
I still think something like this could be worth doing, even if you end up, it's wonderful now, Amazon and other places, but Amazon has a wonderful print-on-demand service. It's not like when I first published my first book in 2005 and had to order 3,000 copies, which was over $10,000. And then I had my garage full of books. No, you can order one book at a time, and it can be a short book like I've described, and you could just hand it out to people for free when you're meeting them at the Rotary Club or the Chamber of Commerce. The book should be designed so that it answers the frequently asked questions, so that it adds value, but it can just be an appetizer. It doesn't have to be an encyclopedia. It doesn't have to be everything that you know. But I invite people to make a book that attracts your ideal customer, that is transparent about who you are and what you stand for and what your values are, and repels people who are not your ideal customer. So I am transparent that I'm spiritual, and that I do karma math, that I want my life to make a difference. So people who are just in it for the money are not my ideal client. I only take on clients now who are making a difference in the world, or that's their intention. So I say that, so whatever you stand for, the listeners, make that transparent in your little book. So for a couple of bucks, maybe even for $2, you could get books print on demand from Amazon, and you could hand them out and network. In contrast to, I love technology, and maybe we'll get to talk about ChatGPT and Claude and Notebook LM and all the exciting things that are happening in tech. But if you're just starting out, there's a lot to be said for meeting people and connecting with people, and that's underutilized. So many people spend spend money. Facebook will be glad to take your money. But my experience is it can cost about $300 to $400 to get a lead on Facebook, whereas my system cost $1. And if you are handing out books, maybe your cost is $2 or $3 for that book because you don't have the shipping. So I'll pay that all day long for a good lead.
Yeah. So I love everything that you said about the marketing part of the book, and about how people don't split test the titles or the covers, or they're not doing the things that a normal marketer would know to do to launch any other funnel that they have. Because we run into the same thing with the people that we work with, is that with their funnels and with their images on their ads and all these other things, they put it together once and then it doesn't work, and then they're like, oh, it didn't work, it's a scam, and blah blah blah. It's like, no. You got to test these things. Like that's how this works. You put something together, see how it goes. And if it doesn't work, then you swap something out and you test it and see if you get a better result. And it's the process of doing that over and over and over that gets you to the point where you're making 7 figures at some point. You solve enough problems, and now you've got a business that's doing really well. But you got to solve the problems, and you got to go through the testing first. So I love that you brought that up. I guess the question that I have is, when you're doing this with a book, how do you do that testing? Do you actually have to print the book first, or is there a way to test it without having to print the book? Or what's the process you go through to determine like the title and the cover and all those things?
Great question. No, I'm all about let's test this in advance. So I have like a 3 to 6 month best-selling book launch process. And we do multiple things. But some of the things that we do is once the author and I feel that the book is really solid, that the content is really great, then we look at it again, and say, we thought we were solving this problem, but is that the main meat of this book, or have we accidentally solved other problems that are more juicy and exciting? Just like Leah was saying, I'm gonna use that as the hook for this podcast. Like, you could have used various different things. So you reviewed it and you made a decision. $250,000 in 90 days with the little book. That's the hook that we're going to use. So we review that and then brainstorm titles and subtitles with an awareness of the Amazon algorithm. It's going to serve up those subtitles, but also with it, is it really clear who this book is for and what problems it solves? And then we usually get a short list of maybe 5 or 6 titles and subtitles. And then there are services that you can use before the book is published. You can keep it completely secret. It's just in-house to test it and get immediate feedback. I use a service. I'm not an affiliate. I use a service called PickFu. I hate saying that name, but it's pick and then fu.com. And for $50, you can get 50 people to give you feedback. I usually drill down into the audience a little bit more precisely. So you can get 50 people who read 2 books a month, who are on Kindle Unlimited, who have 2 kids under the age of 12 to give you feedback. And that might cost $100, but it's very drilled down. And it can usually get the feedback it could be sometimes within an hour, but within 2 days, you'll have the feedback, even if you're really narrow niche. So I just did this helping a client launch her book. It's called The Vitality Solution. It's coming out probably in a few months because she's eager to get it done. I'm like, no, we have to do the pre-launch. Anyway, so we had a brilliant subtitle and we had all done the covers and everything. And at the last minute, she's like, well, I think this subtitle would work better. I'm like, well, let's test it. So we tested it. And within less than a day, we knew, no, our original subtitle was much stronger. And not only did we have the data to say the 50 people were like, 40 of them liked the subtitle that I had chosen, but we had the reasons why. So the people give you that detail. So that's just one example of one way to kind of bulletproof your book. The other thing I do with people before we publish, after the author feels like, okay, that's brilliant, that's everything that I have to say. And after it's been proofread, we then send it out to beta readers. So these beta readers would be people who like to read books in that genre, but they're not on my payroll or they're not friends and family of the author. These are neutral, professional people in the publishing industry. And then we ask them various questions. I just did this for another book that's coming out in December. It's a legal thriller. It's called Jake Fox Ties That Blind. And we got 6 beta readers to give us reviews. Some of the comments we thought, okay, well, that's just that person. But there were a couple of things that could be more clear. And there was one scene that 2 people objected to and thought it was too sexual and it wasn't really a plot point. So the author just dialed it down. So we made that book more bulletproof for the final reviews from the general public. And then now that it's done, it's gone through all of those processes. Now we're applying for book awards. So when you launch a book that's been tested, the covers are tested, the title's tested, everything is tested, and even the content, you have confidence that it works, then you win awards. And then like Confessions of an Accidental Lawyer has got over 3,000 reviews on Amazon and more than 10 awards. That's the previous book that I launched for Michael Stockham, a legal thriller. So the process works. It requires patience. But if you're going to spend 3.5 years or even 3.5 months writing a book, don't drop the ball just at the finish line.
Yeah. And I love that little tip about that website, PickFU. Was that it? PickFU.
Yes. That's very good, useful.
Yeah. I learned about it was either that website or something very similar to it. When we were selling products on Amazon, at some point we'd come across some training about a website like that where you could submit your product or some split test of product images, or it was something where we could split test different versions of a product or something to get feedback. And I remember at the time thinking that was a really neat service and that should probably be useful for me someday in the future. And now that you bring it up, the cost of that, paying $50 to get reviews or opinions from 50 very targeted people, that is so cheap. Yeah, I think about what it would cost to get 50 people on my email list to get their opinion. Or get 50 people into a Facebook group or 50 people anywhere on social media. And especially targeted like that, where the demographics, the interests, or you know who it is that you're targeting. That is so cheap to be able to do that. Now, the rest of this process where you mentioned getting the review from the 6 different beta readers and things like that, what would you say if you had to kind of ballpark it from beginning to end, all this testing process? You said it was a 6-month process. Is that how long it took?
Once the book is more or less complete, I argue for 3 to 6 months to do the bestseller launch. So that's basically the distinction. When you're really committed to a great launch, you don't just finish whatever the thing is and then put it out in the marketplace with 0 demand and 0 buzz and nobody knows about it. It's like, oh, there it is. And then it crickets is the response. So that 3 to 6 month period is when the book is mostly done. Maybe we're going to do one more proofread, but it's about applying for awards, getting the beta readers, getting the reviews, getting the marketing all lined up so that the book hits the market fully with the buzz and energy behind it. So for example, Jordan Peterson's new book, We Wrestle with God, just came out. Well, I attended a conference where he was speaking about that book in May in Los Angeles. So he's been talking about that book for a year before it came out. That not only refined the content of the book, but it's got people like, where is that book? I want the book. They can sign up for pre-sales, right? You can put your book for sale on Amazon up to a year in advance of the publication date, and you can get people ponying up, and then the day it comes out, it's going to have 1,000 readers because they've got 1,000 pre-orders. Or you can use Kickstarter. Kickstarter is another exciting thing. But I just want to add, because I think your show is about trailblazing. So before testing the title and subtitle, pop on over to ChatGPT or use Claude.ai and say, okay, this is what the book is about. This is the goal. Maybe even give it a chapter or two from the book or the synopsis of the book or the back cover so it knows what the frick you're talking about. And then ask it, what would be 10 titles that you might think would be good? What are 10 subtitles? And then you'll throw out half of them because they're garbage. But okay, you could work with those 5. Are those better than what you had as your working title and your working subtitle? So before sending it for testing, take advantage of the AI tools that we've got available today and do some testing so that you're casting a wider net. Because it's so easy to get trapped in a narrow way of thinking and just change 1 or 2 words. Well, maybe there's a way better title.
So the other question I have is, if you were to have to kind of ballpark a number of what it costs to do the testing and the beta authors and all the marketing stuff beforehand, how much are you investing into that before you launch?
You can either invest time or you can invest money. So I would say if you're going to invest money, I like to advise my clients that I recommend a budget of $5,000 for the Amazon bestseller launch. Because with $5,000, I can line up all those things. I can execute that for them and they don't have to do it. If they have more time than money, then you can beat the pavement, you can send out emails, you can post on Facebook, you can do some of these things yourself. But if you get beta readers who are friends and family, that can be useful, but they're going to give it to you soft, right? So you haven't bulletproofed your book. You can apply for awards using an award service that is more costly but fast, or you can hunt online for awards and you can submit an award for maybe $50, $35, $100, but it'll maybe take you 4 hours. So yeah, you pay with time or you pay with money, but don't pay by sacrificing your book's success. And all of these principles apply to other products and services or businesses that you're launching. It doesn't have to be that you're testing the title of a book. You could test the title of an offer.
That's true. I could see doing that for a lead magnet, for an offer, for anything, especially if you're going to spend money, like ad spend on a Facebook ad or something. Testing that thoroughly with a site like that makes a lot of sense in my mind.
Yeah. And then don't forget about the value of story. So one of the things I get into in the book Turn Words into Wealth is I wanted to prove the value of stories. I think we all intuitively know that stories are kind of a good thing to add. But when we hear statistics like, oh, the average person has a 5-second attention span, it tends to tip us towards trying to be super, super short. And sometimes the story gets lost. So I want to invite people to know that actually, if the story is good, people have a lot of time. You can tell that for sure because of people who binge watch Downton Abbey, right? Or other things. But if it's not interesting, they move on to the next thing. So two things. One is story, which I'll talk about in just a second, but make sure that your content is not about you, but what's the value for the other person. So this is a very important filter, and people make this mistake all the time. They're like, well, I'm so great, and I'm doing this, and this is the name of my company, and this is the name of my book. Who cares if you haven't also communicated, this is the problem I solve, this is the cost and consequence of having this unsolved problem, and if you solve this problem, from hell to heaven kind of thing. And here, by the way, here's this resource that you might want to take advantage of, my book or your videos or whatever the thing. So it's not about you. And in fact, people shut down when they're thinking that it's about them. But when they show up trying to be of service, it's much easier to communicate effectively. But the second thing I want to talk about is story. So if you add a story, you guys have got my notes, so you probably know the answer to this. But just guess, if you add a story to an object or to a product or service versus selling it just nuts and bolts, what do you think would be the impact? Would it increase the sale and price or not? And if so, what would be your guess? By how much?
Well, it definitely increases, but by how much? Did you have guess some percentage, Todd?
I would have guessed it's 3 to 5 times tops.
Yeah. Most people guess double. But it's very interesting. There's a book called Significant Objects, and they put 100 different objects on eBay with a story and without a story. And the story, it was a story that added significance, not hype. So an example would be, these are my grandmother's pot mitts. I remember that she would use them to bring out the chocolate chip cookies, and we'd have chocolate chip cookies when I came home after school or after work. So I don't get your grandmother or the cookies when I buy the pot mitts on eBay, but you've added significance. I do get the significance. And the data was that it increased the value by 27 times. 27 times. So you are shooting yourself in the foot if you don't collect stories and share stories. It could be your origin story, why you started your business. It could be stories about your clients, how you impact them, the challenges that they were facing, and then you came along with the solution, what a difference that made to them. We should be practicing and collecting stories all the time. And then you can try out those stories on LinkedIn or Facebook or TikTok. But like Todd was saying a minute ago, there's so many other elements, right? The same story, maybe the story is perfect, but your tagline was wrong, or the color was wrong, or the sound was wrong. So, but play with story. And I bet you will notice that the average time that people are watching your content or consuming your book increases dramatically. And your ka-ching ching could increase by 27 times. So it's worth it. I like to say, like Steve Jobs, when he was running Apple, like he practiced for 3 weeks his Apple pitches for the great unveilings, where to stand, what to say. So if somebody's that busy, thinks it's worth his time to practice for 3 weeks, I think we as entrepreneurs and coaches and leaders and speakers, or people who are trying to make a bigger difference in the world, can allocate more time to collecting and practicing delivering stories.
So with that free plus shipping book funnel, did you have anything else in the back end as far as upsells or downsells, or was it just the book to kind of test it out?
Well, the $250,000 definitely didn't come from selling books. I had a back end offer. So it was similar to what I'm doing now at Same Page Publishing. So we help experts and entrepreneurs and thought leaders who are determined to make a difference in the world launch to the next level as thought leaders. So what that usually looks like is a discovery process for about a month, where I do like a mini feasibility study. Is this book viable? Will the client get it? I always want them to have at least a 10x return on investment. So if they're investing 6 figures with me, I want them to make 7. If they're investing 5 figures with my company, I want them to make 6. Like, I want them to have that 10x ROI. What other books are in the marketplace in this genre, in this space? Is there a hole in the marketplace in that area? And can we claim that, grab that space? And then I look at their business. I have an MBA. I've launched multiple businesses to make sure that they're not writing a poetry book, which is probably not going to have a good back end, or they're actually in business, not thinking about maybe sort of kind of one day getting into business, in which case they would be better off maybe with somebody who's less expensive, but who's not, then they would spend 3.5 years doing it. So for example, I've helped companies that were already running, that already had great employees, that already had venture capital, or maybe didn't have venture capital, and let's help them all raise 7 to 8 figures just by nailing their message. So it doesn't always have to be a book. And then in terms of, you want to make sure that whatever your offer is, that it's an irresistible offer. So can you offer a guarantee? Can you offer some grants? So for example, in Canada, I was able to set my clients up with a grant that covered half the cost of their investment. So think about, how can you add more value? I think as entrepreneurs, we solve problems and profit. So how can you solve more problems, which will create more profit for yourself? But I think if you always try to be useful and make the client go like, well, I made a 10x return on my investment, I'm going to renew, or I'm going to recommend, or I'm going to do this again. So my experience, for example, with the author, Michael Stockham, we're writing 9 legal thrillers now because he likes the process of working with me so much. And that's the author whose book I mentioned before, The Vitality Solution, which is coming out soon. She's now working on a workbook and 9 little booklets because she liked the process so much. So you want to be that person that your clients can't imagine life without you.
I think if even if you don't get all the other stuff right, if you can do that well, at least you can change lives and you can get a ton of referrals and work on all the other stuff that you should be doing as well.
Exactly right. So we talked about 2 of the 7 different ways to make 7 figures with your message. There's 5 more in Turn Words into Wealth, but one of them I think is worth highlighting, which is a book is kind of the entry fee to become a public speaker. And public speaking is the highest paid profession. So, the Jordan Petersons and the Tim Ferrisses and the, Barack Obamas of the world are potentially making 6 figures or more per 90-minute keynote, right? Hillary Clinton made $250,000 per talk. So if you are interested in becoming a public speaker, you absolutely positively must have a book. If that's you, I'd be glad to help you at Same Page Publishing. So consider that. And then the one more thing I want to add to this, I started off by saying that little 9-year-old me wanted to write a book because of reading C.S. Lewis's The Narnia series, which starts with The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. So I'm going to get choked up here. So C.S. Lewis changed my life actually twice, and he was already dead. So a book can be part of your legacy. You can share the things that you've learned, the hardships that you've gone through. You can warn other people about those potholes. And I think the reason to read is to avoid making all those mistakes yourself. A book for $20, it can have a decade of wisdom in it. It's the cheapest way to get access to the best minds, whether they're alive now or not. And so if you have gone through some difficulties and overcome them, or if you are launching a business or launching a movement, why not consider a book as part of your legacy, as part of your way of making a bigger difference in the world? At least that is my experience. I have so many people who've mentored me that I've never met because I've read their books.
That is so powerful and so very true. And yes, C.S. Lewis is amazing. And I love so much of his stuff. And I'm a big Tolkien fan. And their friendship and conversion and the whole thing is very, very moving and powerful. So this conversation, I feel like I could go on forever, especially if I go down the rabbit hole of fantasy novels and Tolkien and C.S. Lewis and all kinds of stuff like that. But to start to wrap things up for our audience, if they want to learn more about you, where should they head?
If they want to learn more about me, they can jump on over to turnwordsintowealth.com. They get a free Thought Leader Launch Starter Library, and they'll get to see 5 free videos that will help them attract capital, clients, and media coverage. And if they're the kind of person who likes reading books, they can jump on over to Amazon and grab, or other places too, but grab Turn Words into Wealth. I think that there's so much information in there. In addition to showing you the 7 different models and giving you examples of people like David Goggins who have done this, it also walks you through how to create $1 million message. I think a lot of us, somebody asks us, what do you do? We go, blah, 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 right? Because we haven't thought through how to communicate it. So some examples of $1 million messages are Tim Ferriss's The 4-Hour Workweek, or Seth Godin, The Purple Cow, or Brene Brown, Power and Vulnerability. So I want everybody to have something like that as their go-to.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much for being with us, Aurora. This has been an amazing conversation.
Thank you, Leah. Thank you, Todd. I really enjoyed it.
You've been listening to the Digital Trailblazer podcast. For show notes and information about today's guest, head to digitaltrailblazer.com. Now, if you love this episode, if you got some value, make sure you leave us a review and subscribe. And be sure to share this episode with anyone you know who could use help to build their business. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.